The Eastern Conference Finals tips off later tonight. So to help you get ready, we're recording a special crossover episode with John Karalis of Locked On Celtics. Everything you need to know about key matchups, big questions that could shape the series, and final predictions on today's playoff edition of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to a special crossover episode to help preview the Eastern Conference Finals between the Boston Celtics and Miami Heat. I'm David Ramil, the co-host of Locked On Heat. With me is my co-host Wes Goldberg, and we're joined by John Karalis, the host of Locked On Celtics. John, first and foremost, how are you doing after that brutal 7-game series against the Milwaukee Bucks?
It was so physical that I spent an hour in the ice bath last night. That's like a wild. It was a wild series. Like, those guys beat the hell out of each other. That was kind of fun to see.
Are you okay to record a day show? I mean, do you need an extra day off or anything like that? I know Celtics fans are already using that as an excuse going into the matchup.
I mean, let's be honest though, isn't it like something that is going to impact the team? I mean, it has the potential to be. I mean, you have one day off between the series. Any extra day you can get to prepare means an extra film session, an extra, and it's not about like the Heat coaching staff and the Celtics coaching staff. They all have people assigned to who might be the next the next opponent, and everybody's got their plans, and the coaching staffs are fine, but the players switching gears and switching their mindsets to, you build up some muscle memory over the seven game series. And so, I think there is the potential for that game one, just like there was the potential for game one against Milwaukee coming in after that Brooklyn series to say, hey, look, Brooklyn, that you can say it's as physical as you want. Milwaukee's going to smack you in the face, and the Celtics got smacked in the face. Now, that's game one. And if you lose game one because of it, you have 6 other games to potentially, get your 4 wins. But I'm not going to discount the possibility of having an extra day. Just gives you that, and you know how it goes, guys.
Well, we've already seen some of the
you can get.
We've already seen some of the repercussions of it. Marcus Smart now listed as questionable because of some mid-foot sprain that he suffered apparently during Game 7, while Kyle Lowry, we know, has been injured for longer than Marcus Smart, but has had more time to sort of get back and recover potentially for this thing ahead of game one, although his status is still up in the air. Before we get really deep into this crossover preview thing, though, can I already just say I'm already intimidated by Locked On Celtics because he's got this whole TV thing in the background playing the Locked On Celtics logo over and over again. There's bobbleheads and bats. All I have is a plastic flamingo that I've had.
I've got a shower curtain behind me, so don't worry about it.
So they've got some sort of high-tech things happening in Boston right now. We need to step up our game if we're going to win this series. That's all I know.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's
part of the gritty Heat culture.
Yeah. You got the culture. I got the tradition. The tradition gets me a TV. Culture gets you a flamingo.
Yeah, the Heat also have the more recent championship. But
they do. It's nice that you got a couple.
Well, I did want to ask a question as we're getting into the weeds of this series, because you did mention the preparation and everything else like that. So one of the things that I'm looking at is in your series against Milwaukee, obviously the forefront as far as the approach defensively and offensively is Giannis Antetokounmpo. With Miami, although you have Jimmy Butler, you've got much more of a team-centric approach in terms of their offense and everything else. So what do you think is the key to matching up and facing that particular challenge? And do you see it as an advantage or disadvantage for Boston?
I mean, there is an advantage in having gone through that physicality, and there's just no player on the planet like Giannis, right? So I think once you've gone through a series against Giannis, everything else is probably just a tick easier because he's a, you're trying to catch a moving truck. So, but it doesn't make it easy. I don't want to get that twisted because Miami is a different team. They have different strengths. You're not trying to build an entire offense off of one gigantic megastar. So you've got to watch for different things. And that's why I'm kind of curious how game one goes, because it's a lot more. I heard you guys talking about it on your podcast, a lot more driving kicks, a lot more. You have to worry about that shooting a little bit more. And you have to worry about different elements in the game. So I think the Celtics and the Heat match up really, really well. I think they each kind of have similar strengths. It's going to be a very evenly matched series as far as the wings matching up against wings and bigs against bigs and stuff like that. It's just a matter of who can kind of come up with the little chess pieces, the little chess match to get the Celtics pull. Can you use Al Horford? Are you going to start Robert Williams and give Bam Adebayo a reason to stay near the rim so we can protect the rim? Or are you going to do something different and try to spread the floor to kind of pull him away and give yourselves a little bit more opportunity to get to the rim? So that the chess match is going to be super interesting in this series.
Well, I mean, Wes, that's a good place to lead off there. Do you see the insertion of Grant Williams or Robert Williams as being a more difficult challenge for Miami to address?
I don't know that either is more difficult, but certainly they present different challenges. I think it depends on what Robert Williams looks like. I mean, he was listed as available for Game 7, didn't play at all. Now Ime is saying that he's going to be available without any sort of minutes restriction. That kind of seems like a pretty wild swing to me. And so I still have questions about what he's even going to look like. But that is, to John's point, kind of the chess match in this whole thing. You don't really, like, you can theorize all these different sort of things. Like John was saying, you play Robert Williams and you potentially have to keep Bam closer to the rim, which limits his ability to switch out into the perimeter, which is such a strength for Miami. Whereas if you have Grant Williams, you're able to space the floor a little bit more, be a little bit more versatile offensively, which also has its advantages. And you could theorize about all the different kinds of ways that it will work. And then once the ball gets tipped and the people start dribbling and rebounding and all the things start happening, all that stuff just sort of goes out the window. I think you really need to see it work in practice to really make some sort of determination off of it, which is my long way of saying I think we'll see both of them, and I have no idea which one will play to the advantage of which team. You will only know when this series really starts. John is exactly right. This series, I know everybody was calling Celtics Bucks basically the
Finals
NBA Finals, right? And look, it might end up being that, right? But I do think that we shouldn't overlook this matchup. Both teams match up really, really well. They're really similar defensively. They have singular talents offensively that their entire offenses revolve around. Shooting is going to be such an important factor, just like it is in every series. This is going to be fascinating from an X's and O's standpoint. There's going to be adjustments from within every game and from game to game. And it is, I do think this is a series that will be won on the margins. That does not mean necessarily that it'll go 7. It doesn't mean that every game will be close. I don't know. The margins have a way of sort of, kind of getting big and turning into bigger advantages, whether a team finds a crease, finds some sort of advantage in the middle of a game from 3-point shooting or something like that. A rebounding edge could swing a game. But I do think that, this is a game where the details are really going to matter. And both of these teams are so well coached and have such a high basketball IQ that both of these teams will focus on the details in a way that I don't think like either of their opponents really were able. I don't think they're going to get to that sort of detail-oriented IQ level. As much as fun and as competitive as that Bucks series was for the Celtics, I just don't think that they can get to that level from an execution standpoint the way that these two teams can.
You've got, the Game 7 thing, I think, is a big factor because I think a lot of Boston fans, as much as they might be looking at it as a reason for fatigue and things of that sort, it also helps keep them sharp. They've gone through a competitive fire that Miami hasn't been tested by.
Yeah.
They faced a pretty weak Atlanta team. They face a Joel Embiid that was hindered for most of the series. And, of course, he missed those first 2 games that Miami won easily. So, Wes, we haven't even really talked about this in our show, but are you concerned at all that Miami hasn't been tested as they're facing they're facing their toughest test without a doubt. Do you think that they're going to be ready to handle that kind of challenge?
No, I mean, like, it kind of what the Celtics just went through reminds me of almost like a batting ring on a bat, right? Where you have that heavy ring on the bat in the kind of the donut, and then you get up to the plate and you have that heavy batting ring now off, and it doesn't make hitting a baseball easier. Hitting a baseball is still ridiculously difficult, but you do that for a reason. And so I think that's sort of where the Celtics are kind of going into the series, where the Miami has not been through that test. I mean, the Joel Embiid thing threw a curveball during the semifinal series that they had to deal with, and they responded well and got through that series and closed them out, but not to the level that Celtics Bucks series had finals type of competitiveness. And I don't think that the Heat have been there. They were facing a Sixers team that just seemed like they hated each other and didn't really want to be there. That's not what was going on with Boston or Milwaukee. So I do think that will play a factor. I actually really like where Vegas kind of has this series. I think it makes a lot of sense where they have the Heat favored by a slim margin in game one. I think because fatigue and all these things going on with Boston could play a factor. It is at home in Miami, right? But they also have the Celtics favored for the entire series, which I think is interesting to have one team favored and the other one to win the series right now. And so I think that makes sense. I think that's a pretty accurate way to approach what this series might look like, or certainly, all the things at play here. It kind of feels like that might be the way it goes.
On the flip side, John, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead. I was just wondering, on the flip side, do you see Boston kind of taking their foot off the gas, or just because they're not prepared, or not? It's not necessarily going to be prepared, but they went through this tough challenge, obviously the physicality and everything else, and now they're facing a team that's just wired very differently than that Milwaukee team was. So how do they kind of game themselves up for that responsibility, that challenge?
Yeah, no, I think coming into this, obviously it helps that these two teams are very familiar with one another, right? And Ime is very familiar with everything that Eric Spoelstra wants to do, and vice versa. I mean, these guys have a history together. They have spent a lot of time together through their Portland days, through Team USA, through all of that. So they know. One of the strengths about Miami is just their willingness to just say, all right, this was the plan for game one. That's not working. We're going to go to a different plan. We're going to do They can throw different looks. Ime talks about we got to throw different looks at these guys all the time. And two teams that come to mind when you talk about different looks, it's Toronto and it's Miami. And that is going to be where, if there's anything that I'm looking at in the first, coming off of a Milwaukee series, I'm not worried about the physicality or anything like that. I think the Celtics are just going to come in and they have adopted the personality of Ime Udoka. They are just come in, they're going to fight. There's no letting off the gas, not to start, I don't think. But when I talk about that lack of preparation, they just haven't had the opportunity to practice up against all of the different zone looks that they're gonna see. They're not gonna, in whatever new wrinkles that the Heat coaching staff is going to come up with, because they're always coming up with something. So that's where, if I have a fear for the Celtics, it's going to take them maybe a little bit to kind of warm up and kind of get into this series a little bit, because I asked Ime about this at the practice, and he kind of brushed it off because he said the team is better against the zone than they have been in the past. But the Celtics have been not great when you're playing a certain way and all of a sudden you switch. Do you play a switching defense? Do you play, you're fighting through screens and all of a sudden you go to a zone look, a box on one, and whatever the hell you want to do? The Celtics have been slow to adjust to that kind of stuff. And so that's where I wonder, especially early on. Once you get some game film and reps and all of that, maybe you can start to figure things out and you can anticipate the calls and you can kind of, get into it. But yeah, I do have a little bit of a concern early on that it's like Greg Maddux used to be. This is my old man reference. But the big junk ball pitcher just throws like 10 different junk balls at you.
Greg Maddux is an old man reference now. I can't believe it.
I hate to say that. I hate to say that.
I think we're dating.
We have to explain it to Wes, the young kid on the broadcast.
I think I had Greg Maddux on my middle school fantasy baseball team.
Yeah, see, exactly.
All right, well, we'll talk about some of those key matchups in the next segment, as well as giving our final predictions later on in the show. But before we do that, just want to tell you that today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Daily fantasy made easy, and easy is really what they're all about. As fantasy props and pick'ems get more popular, PrizePicks is making it easy for you to play. They do that with the best NBA DFS prop game on the market, offering more NBA props than any other DFS prop operator. PrizePicks offers any prop that you can think of, from point scores to rebounds and even steals. And check out the PrizePicks Power Play. Here's how it works. You predict the over-under on a player's fantasy production, and you can win up to 10 times on any entry. And it's just you versus the projected fantasy totals. For a limited time, PrizePicks has an exclusive no-brainer of an offer for all of our users. Users get $50 for free. if a player in your first PrizePicks entry scores a single point, but you must use the code NBA. That's right. It's an exclusive offer available to Locked On fans. Sign up today and use the code NBA for $50 for free if a player in your first PrizePicks entry scores a single point. Do it all using the award-winning app on the Apple App Store or on Google Play. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. Plus, PrizePicks is safe and offers fast withdrawals. So don't hesitate. Check out PrizePicks.com and use a promo code NBA, or go to your app store and download the app today. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. And we're also brought to you by Built Bar. Imagine dipping your finger into that plastic tub of birthday cake frosting and then opening your eyes and realizing that was only 150 calories and 16 grams of protein. This is what it's like to eat a birthday cake puff from Built. Just received my birthday cake puffs, and I've never tried anything like it before. They're available right now. We can't promise that they'll be there tomorrow, so go get them today at Built.com. If you haven't tried the puffs, I'll let you in on a little secret. That's what friends do. A chocolate-covered marshmallow protein bar. You heard me. Delicious flavored marshmallow covered in 100% real chocolate. So many delicious flavors to choose from, but only if you go to Built.com. Low calorie, high in nutrients, everything you're looking for out of a protein bar without sacrificing any of the taste. So go to Built.com right now. Use the promo code LOCK15 and you get 15% off your order. Use the promo code LOCK15 for 15% off, but only at Built.com.
All right, welcome to a Locked On Heat, Locked On Celtics crossover. Thank you for making the Locked On Podcast Network your first listen every day. Also, make sure to go check out the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast with host Rafael Barlow from NBA Draft Junkies and the author of the NBA Big Board newsletter. Gives fans an in-depth look at the NBA draft, mock draft, player rankings, and of course, he's got Big Boards. It's free and it's available wherever you get your podcasts. What are some of the key matchups, John, in this series that you're looking at?
Well, I mean, I'll start right at the top, right? It's the Jimmy Butler and whoever he's guarding matchup. And this is in the Jayson Tatum, kind of like who guards the best players and how do you guard the best players? One of the things that I'm looking at and why I think the Celtics are going to win this series is that I don't see how both Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown are going to be effectively defended. While I do think the Celtics can effectively defend Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo. Now, Bam's going to be a lot harder to defend. I think he's going to be a real handful. Jimmy, I'm kind of curious to see how they work him, because if you try to do a modified Giannis plan on Jimmy Butler, don't let him get to the rim, force him to take the shots from outside. And if Jimmy Butler beats you with jump shots, then so be it. Still a challenge, but you guys know what I mean. And I think they can kind of modify that plan to kind of go with that. And if Kyle Lowry is not himself, then you can kind of help off of Kyle if he's even going to play. You can help off some of these other guys and just say, if you can chop off the head of the snake, if you can keep Butler from being effective and being the superstar level player that he's been so far, then you really now kind of flip things onto if he's not effective, but Tatum and Brown are, or one of those guys is, right, then you have a big advantage. So I'm just looking right at the top. Who's defending these guys? How are they being defended? And can those guys, each team's stars, can they run offense and can things flow off of them? Because if Tatum and Brown aren't being effectively defended, and you can kick out and you have to help on those guys driving, you have to kick out and Grant Williams getting those open threes and whoever else is getting those open threes, versus if you can slow down these other guys for Miami and you're not getting Tyler Herro threes, and you're not getting the crazy Max Strus, which, is a little thorn in the side for us, people in Boston, since they started here as a two-way player and they ended up cutting him. If you can prevent everything flowing through the Miami Stars, then the Celtics, I think, would have a huge advantage in this series.
Well, you touched on something really important there, which is limiting Jimmy Butler getting to the paint and kind of maybe making that Giannis type of wall. We saw this a little bit against Philadelphia. As soon as Joel Embiid was introduced into that series, his ability to play that gap, right in that free throw line, all of a sudden, Miami wasn't able to get under the basket and kick out. And all of their drives were just truncated a little bit, cut off short, right at the foul line. And that just makes closing out on Max Strus and Tyler Herro and their shooters that much easier, right? Because you're not collapsing that defense as much, and they're a little bit closer even when they try to get a hand on Jimmy Butler or whatever. That is going to play. If Boston does take that approach, that could be a really interesting thing. The one guy who I think can break that is somebody like Bam Adebayo, who is so athletic and so explosive coming out of that role when he's playing aggressively that, okay, you're going to do this to Jimmy. Well, we've got Bam now sort of coming around the other side of that on the other end of the paint and trying to break that. Now you open up things for a potential lob and backdoor cuts from him and things like that. But Boston's defense is just so connected, so long, all this stuff. Like every one of those gaps that I'm talking about just evaporate within a millisecond. And it's going to be just snap decision after snap decision, which is why, by the way, as an aside, I think Kyle Lowry is absolutely necessary at 100% for if the Heat don't have that, they don't win this series. Point blank. That's it. Forget it. But in terms of guarding Jimmy Butler, like his man will probably be Jaylen Brown, right, John? Because that's what we saw on March 30th when these teams last played, which I think was the most informative matchup. The Heat went 1-2 against Boston during the regular series, but they won the last game, which I think is the most important one because both teams were healthy, playing for stakes with seeding involved, and Miami had since made their big rotation revamp, adding Strus into the starting lineup and things like that. It'll probably be Jaylen Brown that starts on Jimmy Butler, right?
I mean, I would expect that. It allows Jayson Tatum to kind of be more of a roamer because you can start Horford on Bam. Like really, I look at Miami in a sense. You can kind of, it's almost like a little bit of a downsized Milwaukee, just from pure size wise. Like Bam is, can play a certain style. And it's funny because it's both the Giannis plan, right? It's the Giannis plan against Jimmy, preventing him from getting to the rim. It's also the Giannis plan against Bam, being physical with him and trying to disrupt the timing of lobs and stuff like that. You throw him off. Very physical play, which, look, I know that everybody in Miami loves the physical play, but Boston is bringing a lot of that. And all it takes is gumming it up and throwing off the timing. Any kind of lob, any kind of cuts, anything like that Miami likes to do. If you can be physical and throw off the timing there, you're going to end up causing turnovers. So if you can keep Jayson Tatum as a roamer and you can handle Bam on that backside and you can switch. If one of the guys that you're switching with is Tatum, then that's really huge because Tatum has shown that he can be a really good defensive player. He defended Kevin Durant really well. Struggled against Giannis, but who doesn't? I don't think there's anybody on the Bucks, on the Heat that can give Tatum that level unless Bam is trying to post him up. And I don't think that's even then. I think Tatum has length that can bother, at least challenge whatever they're trying to do. So I don't think Tatum is any sort of mismatch. So, and this is what I was talking about before. I think the Celtics defense has the ability to create, if they're going to switch, which they always do, to create situations where you're not going to be able to find that weak spot. And I'll just throw this guy out at you. This is where I think the series really hinges. Boston can go hunt mismatches on Miami. There's going to be some defender on that floor that's a weak link. Where Boston, depending on the lineups, but when it's best versus best, who do you target on Boston? Right. Who do you target? You can try Bam against Grant and shoot over the top of him. Okay, fine. Like I know Bam's improved, but okay, shoot over the top of Grant. Grant's a stout. I've seen Giannis bounce off of Grant Williams. He's tough. I know you guys are making fun of Stan Van Gundy for saying that Grant's the best defender out there. I'm not going to go that far, but he's a really good defender. And if you try to put a shoulder in his chest, he's not going to move as far as you think he does. So I think what this series boils down to is Boston's defense is just it's hard to find a weak spot.
It's unbelievable.
And I think Miami's defense is
That's why I think
you're gonna find somebody to attack.
You're hitting on something really important. That's why I think that Victor Oladipo, like, don't be shocked if this becomes an issue. What you're talking about, John, like, if they're able to pick on whatever Strus Herro kind of shooting guard slots in there, if they're able to just kind of pick on that player, like, we could see there's a scenario where Victor Oladipo starts in this series, and you just say, okay, we'll match this. It could, like, I'm not saying that's going to happen, David. I'm just saying, like, there's a world in which that could happen if we get to that point. It wouldn't happen in the first couple games, but I could see us getting there. If Jimmy Butler can't go toe to toe with Jayson Tatum from a scoring perspective, it doesn't necessarily have to be like, okay, Tatum scores 40, but Jimmy Butler scores 40, but you kind of understand my drift here. Like, if he's not putting up big numbers on the same games that Jayson Tatum is putting big numbers, then the Heat also don't have a chance in this series.
Well, I mean, don't they have that kid Tyler Herro? I mean, he's pretty good, right? I mean,
and
when we saw against
Philadelphia,
we saw them double Herro, make things difficult for him, and that freed things up for everybody else in Miami's roster. Conversely, I don't see Boston doubling much, and they're certainly not going to key in on trying to stop Tyler Herro, but that kind of opens things up. I mean, and Miami, a very good team as far as their passing. Yeah. I think they'll create offensive opportunities. Like, I feel like we're, and again, I don't mean to knock Boston and their defense. It's been very good, but we're kind of overlooking the fact that Miami is also pretty good offensively. I mean, as far as in terms of 3-point shooting, the best 3-point shooting team in the league during the regular season, and defensively, they're pretty good too. So it's not like we can completely overlook what Miami brings to the table.
No, I don't think we are. And look, I do think that Bam Adebayo is the guy. You know, you and I talked about this, David. Like, he's probably not shooting over Grant Williams, but he could jump over Grant Williams. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of where I keep coming back to. You need your and this. I've kept coming back all season long. Like with David, we've talked about this. Like, if the Heat are going to win a championship, Bam Adebayo has to be one of the best players on the court. Period. End of story. And that was before we knew that they were going through the Celtics or whoever. Like, it was Bam Adebayo, no matter who you went through. If it was Boston, if it was Brooklyn, if it was Milwaukee, Bam Adebayo had to be one of the 3 best players on the court. And if he's not in this series, then forget it. But he can get there. He spent so much energy guarding Joel Embiid and fronting him and preventing him from, like, he's not going to have to do that kind of work defensively in this series. He's going to have to do work in this series, but not that level of 24 seconds of the shot clock, just preventing this guy who is so much bigger than me from just catching the ball. And so he's going to have that much more energy to work with on offense. So there's that. I don't know. I'm really interested in the Tyler Herro, how that matchup works out. To me, one of the key matchups in this series is going to be Tyler Herro and Derek White, and how who gets the advantage there, because there are going to be minutes where, like, if Miami's bench can outscore Boston's, that's going to be a huge part of Miami's sort of formula in taking this series. Tyler Herro can do it. Derek White has guarded Tyler Herro pretty well. It might have actually been the one game, but in the one game, Derek White did a pretty good job against Tyler Herro. But I think Tyler still finished with like 17 points, and he was really effective, and the Heat ended up winning that game. That's the matchup I'm looking at. Boston did not trap or double off or put 2 on the ball the way that Philadelphia did. I'll be interested to see if Boston does that at some point in this series, but based on everything we know about the Celtics, they probably don't want to do that, right?
So I would say probably not, but I will also say that Boston will take a look at that Philly series and figure out, like, what informative can they pull off from there that translates, because part of what you are able to do defensively is because you have Joel Embiid back there, and there's just no Joel Embiid on the Celtics. So
no, but they have Jaylen Brown, they have Jayson Tatum, they have better wing defenders. They could put that guy on Jimmy Butler,
and that's the thing. So really, when it comes down to the Herro and Bam, and it goes back to this Milwaukee series where guarding somebody one-on-one, like, they showed a wall on Giannis, but they didn't. Like game 1, they really went over and aggressively doubled Giannis, and he just picked them apart. They were less aggressive. They threw some, and they'll throw some at Bam, and they'll throw some at Jimmy, and they'll throw some at Tyler Herro. They're going to want to force some turnovers. They're going to want to speed Tyler Herro up so he can try to get off the ball quickly, and maybe you can get into some passing lanes there. But can you single cover these guys? If you can single cover, then you have the ability to stay closer to home on the other shooters. If you can single cover Jimmy Butler, which is asking a lot, but if you can, and you can show the help behind him, and you can build that wall behind him, and he knows that I'm not getting to the rim. on these guys. If you can do that, and if you can single cover Bam, then you stop a lot of the open 3-point opportunities that tend to kill teams. So I think that's where the Celtics, one of the best things that the Celtics can do is help each other. Help and recover is a huge strength on this Celtics defense.
Yeah.
Can the Celtics help and recover? Can they show? Can they hedge? Can they keep the Heat away from where they want to be without fully doubling and staying close enough to challenge, contest 3-pointers? That's really one of the strengths of their defense. And if they can do that, and I think Robert Williams has the potential to be a big factor in this series, because the Celtics were able to get past Milwaukee, and I think it's a testament to just how much Milwaukee missed Chris Middleton, that the Celtics were able to do certain things and use certain personnel. Robert Williams can be huge in this, because if he now can be the roamer, now you've got that shot blocker at the rim. If you can, I would even wonder if they put him on, you could start Robert Williams on Kyle Lowry if he plays and he's not 100%. You know what I mean?
Right.
You'd be just roam off of him. And if Kyle goes off, then Kyle goes off. He's probably not going to. So that kind of stuff is where I'm looking at defensively. I just think that if the Celtics can pull off that, if they can single cover, then forget it.
Yeah. One more thing before we go to break here, David, but everything that John is talking about in regards to Boston's defense, we could say the same thing about Miami's defense. It is crazy how similar both of these defenses can be, especially when you kind of put Grant Williams in that starting lineup with Al Horford, and now it's so similar to the PJ Tucker, Bam Adebayo thing. It is so similar how these two teams play. These have been the best defenses in the playoffs, East or West, during this playoff run. They play very similar. They like to put a little bit of zone, but they mostly will switch everything during the series. They do have the personnel to basically go one-on-one with people, especially since Strus has been involved in that starting lineup. He's held up better defensively than I think a lot of people give him credit for. This series, every game might be 92-85, which is going to be the exact opposite, I think, of what happens in the Western Conference between Dallas and Golden State, where I think both teams are going to try to score 140 points. This is going to be I think a throwback series, and I can tell you the two people that are the two fan bases that are really excited about that are Miami's and Boston's, and it's a good thing that they named this Larry Bird Trophy just in time for this one, because this has a throwback feel to it already. It really does.
Yeah, Eric Spoelstra said so in practice today, right? That he said that Pat Riley was probably really happy with the makeup of this series just because both teams so defensively minded, et cetera.
Yeah.
They're so focused on playing at such a high level. The pace is going to slow down. It's going to be a real throwback series. So it is going to be really interesting.
Yeah.
And look, I mean, to the point that we're making before, Victor Oladipo, I think, is going to be such a huge X factor. He wasn't playing during that stretch when they faced Boston, and now he's a big factor. What he brings defensively too, I think, is a concern. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how they utilize the versatility on Miami's roster. It's going to be a really interesting factor moving forward. But before we get into our final predictions in the next segment, just want to tell you about our partners over at BetOnline. They continue to be the number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. You can find all the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball scores, fights, and even next season's NFL futures. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Thanks for making Locked On Heat and Locked On Celtics somehow your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On NBA. From the first jump ball of the play-in tournament to the last possession of the finals, Locked On experts take you deep inside the playoffs with insight and analysis affecting all 30 teams. This is a special crossover preview of the Eastern Conference Finals. I'm David Ramil. With me is my co-host Wes Goldberg of Locked On Heat, and we're joined by John Karalis of Locked On Celtics, looking ahead to tonight's matchup between the Heat and the Celtics. Should we get into final predictions, or is there more of the series that you think we should break down here? Because there's a lot. I mean, we could, we're talking about this, and I think all three of us can agree, we're not really entirely sure how it plays out, just because of injury issues, because of the short turnaround for Boston, et cetera. I don't know if we should continue to break down the minutia before getting into our final predictions for the series.
I feel like our final predictions will drive us into more analysis. So we can start going into that.
That's fair. Wes, you want to kick it off? I know how much you love predictions.
No, I do not want to kick it off. I do not want to do that.
Well, I'll start.
Yeah,
I'll start because I have already angered. I angered Brooklyn Nets fans. Bucks fans called me arrogant for my prediction against the
Hey, Bucks fans have
what
called
was
me
your
a
track
lot
record?
worse.
What did you predict against the Nets, and what did you predict against the Bucks?
I said Celtics in 5 against the Nets. I thought that was going to be
not arrogant enough.
Not arrogant enough. So that was 4. I said Celtics in 6 against. In fact, I said not only did I say Celtics in 6.
Okay.
I said split. I said split in Boston, split in Milwaukee, and then Celtics win the next 2. And if they didn't blow Game 5 by pissing away a 14-point lead in the fourth quarter, I would have been right on the money with that. But so I also said coming out of that I thought the winner of Bucks and Celtics was going to beat the Miami Heat. And so now's my time to piss off the Heat, Locked On Heat listeners. So I will say this. I am looking forward to reading all of the hateful comments in my YouTube comments. There's a void left by all the Bucks fans who have since left, so that'll be filled nicely by Locked On Heat listeners. So welcome aboard. I will say this with all due respect. I think my gut wants to tell me it's going to be Celtics in 5, but I have a lot of respect for the work ethic and coaching and just how hard Miami works. I think this is not going to be an easy series, so I'll say Celtics in 6. I just feel like as good as the Heat can be, I feel like there are just a couple too many holes. The Kyle Lowry injury is a real tough one for you guys. And
is it? I mean, I don't. Maybe I should let you go on before, but I'm just wondering. Have you seen Gabe Vincent? I know we're not equating Gabe Vincent to a Hall of Famer, Kyle Lowry, et cetera, but I think Vincent's held up pretty admirably. I mean, getting a shout out from Trae Young on Twitter counts for something, right?
No, I mean, yeah, right. Here's the thing. Gabe Vincent, Max Strus, great stories. I think when you've got a defense at the level that Boston's been playing, with the way that coaching has shown itself to be, I think a true series and this is what the 1 seed is supposed to get, right? The 1 seed is supposed to get an easy first round series. And I think in the second round, you got a Philadelphia team that clearly with the James Harden mess and I mean, Embiid with the broken face and the thumb, that you got a path that got you to this point that was advantageous. Congratulations. I think the Celtics would have loved to have had that path rather than the path that they took. But I feel like my feeling is this defense is just far different than what Miami has seen. I think this defense is highly capable, and I just don't think that Miami can consistently have the second or third best player and third best player. And I think Boston's always going to have the best player in this series. I think they are often going to have the second best player in this series. And then from there, because I feel like there are too many holes in it. Miami's defense can be really good. I think there are too many holes where the Celtics can attack, and they've become really good at once they attack and you adjust, flowing the offense through that. And I think Boston is just a much better overall team than the Heat.
David, do you disagree with the
Yes.
Gabe Vincent, Kyle Lowry? No, but going back because you asked that question about are you overlooking Gabe Vincent? And I don't think that it's fair to I agree with John. If the Heat don't have Kyle Lowry, this thing's over. I just don't see a way. Gabe Vincent is good, but he's not doing those things on the margins the way that Kyle Lowry is, right? And we could talk about Kyle Lowry coaching Gabe Vincent up from the sideline all day long, which has been a nice, fun storyline. But he needs to be on the court. And I just don't there was a reason why they were going Oladipo late in those games over Gabe Vincent, right? Because he just brings experience and know-how and just kind of sheer talent in a way. At some point, these undrafted free agents, I love the stories. They've been great for the Heat. They're a huge reason of why the Heat are where they are with the number 1 seed. But we're talking about the number one. We're talking about the Eastern Conference Finals now, and at some point, like that talent has a ceiling. It does,
Yeah.
and I know that Kyle Lowry isn't like the most naturally gifted player, but he's got so much of experience, championship experience, and know-how under his belt that at this point it does sort of counteract that. Do you disagree?
No,
Like, do you think that he can win this without Lowry?
I think they can win in the interim. Like, I think they can win a game. It's not like they're going to be completely blown out without Lowry in the lineup. And I think Lowry's going to play at some point. Like, he's shown that he could come back. I think he will come back. I don't know that he'll be available.
They'll need him to come back at some point, is your point.
Yeah.
But they don't need him right away. Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
And look, and we're talking about, facing a hindered Joel Embiid. And I agree 100%. He was not anywhere close to 100%. The Celtics just beat a Bucks team that was counting a Drew Holiday who had gone to the NBA Finals, played in the Olympics, and played a long regular season and playoffs. They were without Chris Middleton. Like, that works both ways. I mean, and for as much as there was the Harden drama impacting the intangibles in the Philly side, that Nets team was willing to blow up 100%. Like, they were ready for Cancun from the day the playoffs started. So I don't know. Like, we're kind of making a lot of the fact that they went to the 7 games because it's a nice narrative. It's a nice storyline. It's like, oh, they went the full series. It's fun. It was a fun series, physical on both ends. Maybe Boston hasn't been tested as much as Boston thinks they have. And I think Miami, conversely, with the prolonged rest, might be better prepared, might be more ready for the challenge that Boston presents. And again, you're talking about winning on the margins. That's something Miami's done all season. Somebody has always found a way to step up. You don't know where you're getting out of Victor Oladipo. It could be great. It could be mediocre, and that's certainly been the case. Tyler Herro has certainly shown that he can be, limited, if not mitigated completely in the playoffs. I think he can reach another level. I don't know. It's just I see that this Miami team is kind of getting overlooked on a national level, and I think a lot of people just haven't seen what Miami can do. Like, again, like the story is – the Atlanta Hawks weren't ready. They were a fluke last year. Oh, Joel Embiid was hurt. Not that Miami, whooped Philly up or beat them badly or made James Harden look like a mediocre has-been. Like, that's not the story somehow. I don't know why it's not, but that's the reality. Miami's defense did all that. And I think they're just as good. I think they're just as capable as Boston, and I think they're better offensively than Boston. So if I have to give a final prediction here, I'm going to go ahead and say it. I'll say Heat in 7, but I actually think it's going to be Heat in 5.
Wow. Okay.
Whoa.
As long as we're doing the segment where we get to push back on all the things that John said, and I'm not sure that you meant this. I'm gonna give you an opportunity. I'm just double checking your work here, John.
Sure.
You said that the Celtics will have the 2 best players in this series. So you think that
I didn't want to touch
Jayson Tatum and I guess Jaylen Brown
Jaylen
will be
Brown
better than Jimmy Butler in this series?
I think they can be. I think they can be, and that's like, I'm not saying like I'm saying that the way the Celtics can defend Jimmy Butler, I think there's the potential for them. Just to reiterate, I think they'll have the best player in the series in Jayson Tatum.
You make it sound like it's a wide margin.
It's not that close. Like, I mean. It's not like Jimmy Butler is
you know what
great,
it is?
But Jimmy Butler is great. But
I hate to digress here. You're right. Like, I mean, Tatum's a better offensive player. He also gets a lot more opportunity to do so. And I think this is a different version of Jimmy than the past versions of Jimmy. Like, I think he's more aware at this point in his career that he might not get many more opportunities. I also think that everybody looks at that Boston team with top 5 picks and everything else. It's like, oh, well, they've got this talent disparity. It's like, there have been plenty of busts throughout NBA history where a top 5 pick doesn't mean anything. Like, it doesn't necessarily mean anything. And then you look at the undrafteds on Miami's roster, and again, it ties into the whole Heat culture. They get the most out of their players, the development. It's like, these guys are playing at a high level. They won the Eastern Conference. Like, I mean, they had the best record. They've done everything all year, whether these guys were hurt or not. I don't know. It just kind of
I'll say this. I agree with John that Tatum is the best player in this series.
That's fine.
I think
and I've said this about huge.
I would say the margin's probably not as big as most people think. Only because I think I'll phrase it this way. I think separate of these two teams playing each other, the margin is actually pretty that is pretty wide. I think Tatum is far and away a better player than Jimmy Butler when these teams are not playing each other. But I've said this about Jimmy Butler for the last few weeks. He is not the best player in the league, but he's the best gamer in the league. We saw that in the bubble against LeBron James. He just raises his game in a way that I just don't see other players do it. He will just, and I do think that he's not going to play Tatum even all series long. He just won't. He just doesn't have that like 47-point night in him. Like that's not something that Jimmy Butler does. But, you know, for the other 6 games in this series, they could go toe-to-toe. It could be very even. And Jimmy Butler has to make that as close to a wash as possible. He has to make that as close to an even matchup as possible. And I do think that he can do it. We'll see if he does do it. But we have seen him just raise his game against, you know, LeBron in the NBA Finals and kind of play that even. So I think that there's a world in which Jimmy Butler gets close and makes that margin that is really wide when these teams are not playing each other. He narrows that gap quite a bit in this series. As far as who the second best player, like, and I think those will be your 2 best players in this series. I think it'll be Tatum and it'll be Jimmy Butler. And then as far as who the third best player is, I think it could be Jaylen Brown. I think it could be Bam Adebayo. Now we're talking about like lottery type of freak of nature, athletic talents needing to just harness that stuff. Like Jaylen Brown, there are games where he doesn't look like he knows how to dribble the ball. And there are also games where Bam Adebayo looks like he forgot where the basket is. And so, and doesn't even look at it. So I think both of these teams need to get the most out of like sort of these secondary guys. I'll end this with my prediction. I think, first of all, if Lowry doesn't play a factor in this, and if he's not anything close to 100%, then the Heat don't have a chance. I just think he's too important to this team. There's a reason why they signed him in the first place. They need him. And also, if the Heat can't improve their three-point shooting from 27%, and the Celtics keep shooting 36%, then forget this. Just forget it too. Like the Heat need to bounce back from three-point shooting, and the Celtics need to come back down to earth a little bit more. So with all that said, I really respect that the Heat went out there, got home court advantage in the regular season. Home court, I think, will matter in this series in a way that it didn't in the Celtics-Bucks series, apparently. I got Heat in 7.
Okay, so I want to clarify this, and this is why I get so much from the other team's fans. Just because I say won't doesn't mean I think can't, right? Just because I say that I don't think the Celtics – I think the Celtics will have the best player in the series and potentially on some of these games the second best player in the series. Doesn't mean that I think that Miami can't. I think, look, I say this with all respect. Eric Spoelstra should be a perennial coach of the year. Like he's in that class of, you know, if he doesn't get votes in a certain year, then there's people are messing up. No disrespect to Jimmy Butler. The man goes through a regular season. You're like, oh yeah, you know, he's good. He's good. And then in the playoffs, you come out and you're like, damn, man, the big face coffee and the whole thing and the attitude, like love Jimmy. I love that whole thing. Like, and I have a lot of respect. I love Bam Adebayo. Like I really do have a lot of respect. And I know a lot of Celtics fans don't think, you know, they want to scoff at Heat culture. I do think Heat culture is a real thing. And that's a testament to what Pat Riley and what Eric Spoelstra have built. And it goes from top to bottom. That is a franchise that has risen its game from, you know, and put it in a level of what Boston has historically been, what the Lakers have historically been, not recently. The Spurs have historically been. Like this run, this you know, Spoelstra era, independent of LeBron James, the culture that's been built, I respect all of that. But I just happen to think that the way that things have broken right now, and the way Tatum is playing, and what he's capable of, and what this Celtics team is capable of, and what their defense, the level that they're playing at right now, I just feel like they've passed what they've been in the regular season. They're playing at a level that is well beyond what we've seen in the regular season. And so when I say Celtics in 6, I say that because I think I look at what the roster is and where the Celtics can pick on and what the Celtics can do defensively to hold other players below their normal standards. And so if I say the Celtics have the 2 best players in the series, doesn't mean that I think they're the 2 best players in the world. That's what I'm talking about. I just see the matchups. I see what the Celtics can pick on. I see what the Celtics can do. I see what the Heat can do and what they can stop and how they can be stopped. I think Boston is capable of stopping the Heat to a level where they are not going to win more than 2 games. That's just the way I see the series. But it's not out of disrespect. I think if you guys are right, if it's Heat in 7, I wouldn't be surprised. I'm not going to sit there like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. Like, they're capable, fully capable, because they're well coached, they're well disciplined, they have a ton of talent. They're capable of winning. I just think that they won't.
Can we do one last prediction before we log off here?
Yeah.
Who wins the Larry Bird Trophy for the Eastern Conference Finals MVP? Just the name, and then we can get out of here. Tatum for John. David.
Jimmy Butler, I guess.
Jimmy Butler, you guess. I think if somebody from the Heat wins it, doesn't even matter because they're going to throw it out because there's no way they have the Larry Bird Trophy sitting in FTX
Set it
Arena
up for
somewhere.
that joke. A long way to go for that punchline, but I appreciate it. I appreciate that hate.
All right. Well, we'll wrap up today's crossover preview. If the series does wind up going 7 games, I'm sure we'll have another opportunity to talk further. But thanks so much for tuning into today's show. As always, make sure to subscribe to both Locked On Celtics and Locked On Heat for the best playoff coverage available. This is David Ramil, co-host of Locked On Heat, along with Wes Goldberg, and John Karalis, the host of Locked On Heat. Thank you so much, and continue to subscribe to get the best coverage possible.